Hello guys, I'm excited to make this video. Today, I'm gonna be ranting basically on the start of modernity, 1920s. The reason why I say this decade was the start of modernity in a way was because I think it's really started modernizing if you think about it. Cars started to become very widespread. Women finally got the right to vote. I'm trying to think what else was modernized about it. Well, those weren't as bad. I mean, those weren't that bad actually. But what was bad was like the school system started to change a bit, started to become more modern, which sucks. With the Scopes trial, I think. Yeah. I'll just pinpoint in order what happens in this decade. So 1920. 1920, I'm trying to think. The Spanish flu pandemic ends, which is a good thing. It started in 1918, but I forgot to mention that. I also forgot to mention 1910's review. I think the 1919 Chicago White Sox incident, that was pretty popular around the time. And also, this decade kind of sees the rise in gangsters like Al Capone, which is pretty cool. Also, I think you see the rise in the mafia. I'm not sure though. Or maybe it's the 30s, I don't know. Yeah, 1920. It was pretty optimistic year. Women got the right to vote. Trying to think. Excuse me. What else happened? Spanish flu ended. And yeah, things were starting to get more optimistic. The economy was getting better. Shit like that. 1921, there was more KKK riots. Unfortunately, like I think it was the Tulsa, Oklahoma thing. That was fucking unfortunate. Yeah. 1922, Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb, which is pretty cool. 1923, Disney got founded officially by Walt Disney and his teammates or his crew, whatever. 1924, I don't really know much what happens in that year, to be honest. Look up. What happened in 1924? Fuck. 1924 was like, I don't know. I'm gonna look it up right now. Uh, 1924. Or was it 1923 when they discovered King Tut's tomb, Howard Carter and his crew? I don't know. It's between 22, 23-ish. Yeah, around there. Crazy thing is, that's exactly 100 years before right now. But yeah. 1924, I don't really know what happens that much. 1925, school system starts to modernize with the whole Scopes trial thing. Which, before that, evolution was not allowed to be taught in schools, I think. Something like that. If you don't know what evolution is, it's a form of Darwinism, basically. But yeah. Let's see. Let me see, what else? I'm trying to think. 1925, The Gold Rush with Charlie Chaplin was released. Pretty good fucking movie. Oh yeah, for 1920, Dr. Caligari got released. In 1922, Nosferatu got released. Those are pretty good movies as well. Yeah, movies start to get better in this decade, in the 1920s. I'm not gonna lie. In 1926, not much really happened. The Charleston, that's about it. 1927, the first talkie movie was released. First time you get to see someone talk in a movie. Pretty fucking cool. 1929 was the rise of Laurel and Hardy in a way. But also in 1929, the fucking stock market crashes, unfortunately. But yeah, overall pretty cool. People that died in this decade were Woodrow Wilson, Warren Harding, who else? I'm trying to think. I think that's about the ones I remember. And then there's this baseball player. I forgot his name. Let me look it up. Baseball player. Ray Chapman dies in this decade, yeah. He died because he was hit in the head by a pitch delivered by Yankees pitcher Carl Mays. He crumpled at the plate and died the next day, unfortunately, yeah. This was on August 16th, 1920. Okay. Yeah, that happened, unfortunately. But yeah, this decade also, fashion starts modernizing. Girls start wearing shorter dresses. Men start wearing shorter suits. Yeah. Stuff like that. Let's see. Oh yeah, inventions. TV gets invented in the 1920s. Also, yeah, I didn't know that actually. Yeah, TV actually got invented in the 1920s. It was invented around 1925 by a farmer boy. I forgot his name. But yeah, it was invented at that time. But it didn't get popular till the 50s. What else to mention about the 20s? The party life. I'm not gonna lie. The party life in the 1920s is awesome. You get to see the flappers dancing, which is pretty cool to see. You get to see, I don't know, a lot of cool shit. It was just a chill time, really, when it comes to, like, partying and stuff. Partying was pretty good in the 1920s. But it did spawn the birth of, rebellion against the older generations, I guess. So, yeah, in that kind of sense. But, I mean, it was all like that, I guess. But, yeah, that happened. Let's see. What else happened? Who were the presidents at this time, in this era? Woodrow Wilson, he's more of a 1910s president. He was president for only, like, the first 2 years of the decade. Then there was Warren Harding, who becomes the first person since McKinley to die in office, I think, unfortunately. But then again, Warren Harding wasn't really a good president, to be honest. He kind of sucked. Calvin Coolidge, pretty underrated. He's a chill guy. The only thing that, like, that was bad about him, really, is he wasn't really much of a president leader kind of role. He was more of like a downtime kind of person. He liked to play golf a lot and stuff. In the end of the decade, Herbert Hoover. Yeah, but he's more of a 1930s president. Okay. Music starts to get better, I'd say. You know, it starts to become more energetic and less simplistic. With the rises of musicians like Jelly Roll Morton, Zez Comfrey. Let me see. Who else was another popular musician during that time? Paul Whiteman. He was pretty good. Yeah, I liked Paul Whiteman's music. I listened to, from him, I think, Japanese Sandman, Whispering. I'm trying to think of another one I listened to. Let's see. What was another good song by Paul Whiteman? The Charleston. I fucking love that song. Those are great songs. Yeah. And what else? I'm trying to think. Fashion, like I said, it starts to modernize. Men start wearing shorter suits and women start wearing shorter dresses. Cars start to rise, for real. It's not just, well, it's not a mix of horses and cars. It's starting to lean more towards cars in this decade. the 1920s. More people can afford cars, and yeah, the mass production by Henry Ford starts in this decade, the 1920s, which is pretty cool. We get to see more cars made than the last decade, the 1910s. What else about this decade? Let's see. Trying to think. Oh yeah, there was a good book that came out in this decade, The Great Gatsby. Basically, the book is about a rich guy named Great Gatsby. I mean, not Great Gatsby. Jay Gatsby, that's his name. Jay Gatsby. He basically becomes rich, and then he noticed, like, it's not really always, fun, I guess. And then he one time, and then I think in like one of the pages, he runs over one of the wives of one of the retail workers. Uncle Frank was his name, or not Uncle Frank. His name was Frank, or something. I don't know. So yeah, that pisses Frank off, and then Frank eventually, while Gatsby's swimming, shoots him, and Gatsby dies in the end, I think, which is pretty sad. Yeah, Great Gatsby was a book that came out in the 1920s. It was a pretty good fucking book. I enjoyed it, although it did get monotonous at times. But at the same time, it also had some good page turners, I guess. Yeah. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to think. We get to see the rises of Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, Laurel and Hardy, Howard Studios. We get to see the rise of Walt Disney in entertainment with Steamboat Willie, which is basically a kind of like a slight, copy to the Steamboat Bill song by Arthur Collins, made like a decade earlier. Yeah, that happens. What else happens? Oh yeah. To any of you that think the Three Stooges were founded in the 1930s, no. They were actually founded in the early 1920s, but back then they weren't on screen yet. They mainly performed in vaudeville. So they were founded in 1922 with Ted Healy, Moe, Larry, and Shemp being the original members. So it wasn't originally Moe, Larry, and Curly. It was originally Moe, Larry, and Shemp. But yeah, Shemp left after like this decade, I think, to pursue a solo career. Yeah. There were also let's see. I'm trying to think. Yeah. There was also like, I'd say this was like the century where the 20th century really starts to define itself in a way. Because like the 1900s, 1910s kind of had a 19th century feel to it. But this decade, you don't really feel that anymore. You kind of feel like the 20th century is starting to kick in, in a way. I think it's because like it takes till like the third decade of a century for the century to start defining itself. Yeah, that's probably why. What else? I'm trying to think. Antibiotics were founded in the 1920s. Yeah, that's a good thing. They were founded around the late 1920s. So basically, it helps treat bacteria more faster and more effectively than it did in the past. That's good. What else happened in the 1920s? Trying to think. Besides the economic boom, before it went to shit around the end of the decade. But like in the early to mid 1920s, the economy was getting better, I'd say. It truly was. Yeah. I'd say this was the best decade of the early half of the 20th century, in my opinion. It was better than the 1900s, 1910s, in my opinion, because, well, things were just simpler in those times than they were in those two decades. there wasn't really a very big war going on in the 1920s that I could think of off the top of my head. Because in the 1900s, you got the Second Boer War, and in 1910s, you got World War One. 1920s, not much with that happens. We do see the rise of Lenin. We do see Hitler writing Mein Kampf, I think, which basically is writings of his plans for the future, basically, after he gets out of prison, because of the Bureau push that happened in the 1920s. Yeah, stuff like that. Let's see. What else? I'm trying to think. 1920s. How would I say this as like a decade, really? I'd say it's an okay. Well, I used to hate on this decade, but honestly, looking at it, it's actually pretty decent. Look, I know there was like still bad stuff going on, but that's with every other decade if you think about it. But like, yeah, it's a decent decade. It actually is. The economy was getting better. You know, the economy was kind of getting better during this decade. People were more optimistic in a way for the future. You know, before World War II ruined everything. But yeah. What else? Yeah, stuff like that, yeah. Parties were, they actually felt like parties in those days. Because you didn't have fucking smartphones, computer, any of those electronics. You didn't have that. Like, you know, people were actually socializing in the parties in the 1920s, you know, which is pretty cool to see. We don't see people staring at their phones when they're walking, which is pretty good. Kids actually played outside in this time. I mean, they still do, but like not to the extent that people in the 20s did. Let's be honest. Let's see. What else was a thing about the 1920s besides the Charleston and the change in fashion? Yeah, I'd say this was the best decade for fashion in my opinion, the 1920s. Because like it had like the perfect mix of modern and old school in my opinion. That's why. Yeah, 1920s in my opinion is the best decade for fashion. I don't know. Something about it. Yeah. Oh yeah, the rise of radios. People start having more radios in their households, which is pretty cool. I think it's the rise of bathtubs as well. All that stuff, all that good stuff. I'm trying to think. What else? Hollywood starts to get better, yeah. Hollywood starts to form itself in this decade with the stuff I mentioned. You also see the rise of Buster Keaton with movies like The General. I think he did Steamboat Bill was the name of the movie, I'm not sure. Stuff like that. I think Sherlock Jr. was also a movie with Buster Keaton in it. Not sure. Fun fact, the name of the movie that introduces the first talkie, if you're interested in checking it out, is The Jazz Singer with Al Johnson in it. He was pretty popular, like, towards the end of the 20s. So, yeah. Yeah, I did talk about the mass production, stuff like that. But yeah, I might rate the decade now out of 10. So, despite some BS in this decade, it was an optimistic decade. I'll give them that. So, I'm gonna give this decade a 5.8 out of 10. Yeah. It's not as bad as I thought it was, actually. It's pretty good in some aspects, I'll be honest. Pretty shitty in others. That's why I give it like between like the late 5s, early 6s. More so late 5s though. or high fives. Because, like, yeah, it's not that great of a decade. But it's also not as shitty as some of the decades that I mentioned in the first half of the 20th century. Were, yeah, pretty bad. But yeah, that's my review on the 1920s. But yeah, what else? Oh yeah, and one more thing. We start seeing more Louis Armstrong songs, which is pretty cool. Like Shanghai Shuffle. That's a great song. Stuff like that. Yeah. That's basically it for my review of the 1920s. Anyways, peace.